There was a man who had everything: a house, a family, a career that paid well, people who loved him. And one morning, he woke up, stared at the ceiling, and felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger. Something far more terrifying: emptiness. He wasn't sick. He wasn't broken. By every measure the world had given him, his life was a success. So why did it feel like he was already dead? Here's what no one tells you. That feeling has a name. Scientists have studied it. And what they found doesn't just explain one man staring at a ceiling. It explains civilizations that collapsed. It explains why people destroy perfectly good lives. And it reveals something deeply unsettling about what your brain actually needs to survive. The question isn't what happens when you lose purpose. The question is, were you ever really alive without it? In the 1970s, a psychologist named Martin Seligman ran an experiment that disturbed the entire scientific community. He placed dogs in a controlled environment where no matter what they did, they couldn't escape discomfort. No choice, no control, no way out. And then something strange happened. When the doors were finally opened, when escape was completely possible, the dogs didn't move. They just lay there, passive, defeated, choosing suffering over freedom. Seligman called it learned helplessness. But the real story isn't about dogs. It's about what happens to a human being when they stop believing their actions mean anything. Because the same mechanism that broke those dogs is running silently inside millions of people right now. And most of them have no idea it's happening. But that's only half the story. Because the collapse doesn't begin with helplessness. It begins somewhere much quieter, much earlier, in a place most people never think to look. Your brain is not built for comfort. That sounds strange, because everything in modern life is designed to make you comfortable. Soft beds, easy food, entertainment on demand. A world that asks almost nothing of you physically. But your brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in a completely different world. A world where survival required constant striving. Where purpose wasn't something you chose. It was something you needed just to stay alive. And here's the disturbing part. When your brain doesn't have a meaningful challenge, when there's nothing real to strive toward, it doesn't relax. It begins to deteriorate. Neuroscientists call this neural atrophy. The brain, without stimulation and purpose, starts pruning connections. Motivation pathways weaken. The prefrontal cortex, the part of you that plans, creates, and feels meaning, goes quiet. Think of it like a fire. Feed it, and it burns bright. Leave it alone, and it doesn't just stay the same. It dies. And here's where the real mystery begins. Because it's not just brain chemistry. Something else happens. Something that reaches deeper into your identity than any neuroscientist initially expected. In 2009, researchers studied a group of workers who had been suddenly laid off. They expected depression. They expected financial stress. What they didn't expect was this. Within months, people who had previously been healthy, social, and stable began showing symptoms that looked almost identical to clinical grief. Not just sadness, disorientation, a loss of self-recognition. They would look in the mirror and feel like a stranger was staring back. One participant said something that stayed with the researchers for years. He said, "I don't know who I am anymore. I knew what I did. Now I don't know what I am." And this is where things become deeply unsettling. Because what those men and women lost wasn't just a job. They lost the story they were telling themselves about who they were. Purpose, it turns out, is not something you have. It's something your brain uses to construct your entire identity. Strip it away, and the self doesn't just feel lost. In a very neurological sense, it begins to dissolve. But this created an even darker problem. Because when humans lose the story of who they are, they don't just drift. They reach, desperately, often destructively, for anything that makes them feel real again. Think about your own life for a moment. Not your achievements. Not your to-do list. The deeper thing. If someone took away everything you do tomorrow, your role, your routine, your reason to get up, who would you be? Your ancestors never had to ask that question. For most of human history, purpose was embedded in survival. In tribe. In seasons and harvests and the raw necessity of staying alive. There was no existential vacuum because life itself demanded everything from you. But then the world changed. And your brain didn't. You're carrying ancient hardware in a modern world. Hardware that was built for struggle, for contribution, for feeling that your existence mattered to something beyond yourself. And when that hardware finds nothing to run, It turns inward. It starts generating its own noise. Anxiety, restlessness, a vague and persistent feeling that something is wrong, even when nothing appears to be. What if that feeling isn't a malfunction? What if it's a signal? Your brain, ancient and desperate, trying to tell you something the modern world never will. That you were not built to simply exist. Here is what the research eventually concluded. Purpose is not a luxury. It's not a philosophical concept reserved for monks and artists. It is a biological necessity, as real as food, as essential as oxygen. Viktor Frankl survived Nazi concentration camps. He watched people with every reason to collapse somehow endure, and people with all the physical strength in the world simply stop. The difference, he wrote, was never circumstance. It was meaning. Those who had a why, something to live for, even in the darkest place on earth, found a way to survive almost anything. Those who lost it didn't. Not because they were weak. Because a human being without purpose isn't really living. They're waiting. And the terrifying truth of the modern world is this. We have built the most comfortable civilization in human history. More safety, more convenience, more distraction than any generation before us. And we have never been more purposeless. The man staring at his ceiling didn't lose his job. He didn't lose his family. He lost the invisible thread that made all of it feel like it was worth something. And the world around him kept moving, as if nothing had happened. As if the most important thing a human being can possess isn't something you can see, or measure, or buy. Purpose doesn't announce when it leaves. It just quietly takes you with it.